Hello and welcome back to Kathy, Andy, and I. And before we dive in this session, this kind of holiday session, really, I'm still in lovely Sedona. We're each going to talk a little bit about what we've got going on and where you can find us. But we're going to talk about toxic masculinity revelations today. So that should um, tickle your taste buds. But anyway, I'm Louise Edington, the Cosmic Owl, Cosmic Owl Astrology. You can find me as Cosmic Owl Astrology on Facebook. I write on Substack, obviously my YouTube channel too. And I am offering a free quantum astrology gathering where I've interviewed several amazing astrologers, including Kathy. And that's being released on January 6th to 17th, entirely free. I'm not selling the recordings or anything, so I'll put the link below if you want to join that. I also have my Venus retrograde heroine's journey class coming up starting in February.
Oh, cool.
And there's an awesome early bird offer for that as well. So I'll put the link for that in the description. Now, Kathy, what about you?
Hey, everybody. I am many places, and because I have the South Node in Gemini, they are not consistent. I'm so sorry. All right. My YouTube channel is Professional Aquarian, and all of my forecasts are recorded and cross-posted there. My main base is my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and that's where you can find me for booking a session. I also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Kathy Biehl, which has completely different bonus content than what is available elsewhere. I'm part of Louise's Quantum Astrology Gathering in January. And in January, I also am hosting an annual event that I do with Donna Woodwell. Every January, we have a Mad Libs approach to the year. It's called Write Your was this year. It's Write My 2025 Story. We go through what the different big astrological transits are and give you a workbook and guide you through marking what's coming in your own life and helping you craft a plan for what you want to do with it. There's a live session, which is recorded. People don't, they seem to be very fixated on that. Yes, it's recorded. We are charging you for this. It's recorded. You get it whether you can go or not. You get a workbook, and then there's a question and answer session for that afterwards. Andy, where are you?
Where am I? The existential question. Well, I kind of have hidden out for the last few years. I used to be on TV and used to do a whole bunch of stuff. I haven't done much for a long time in terms of public things. My website is andrew-brewer.com. Most of the action for me is on Facebook because I started Facebook a long time ago and didn't really bother to do much else. So it's under Andrew Bassano Brewer. I have a thing on Medium, which I used to do a lot, which I barely do anymore, which is Medium at Andrew Bassano Brewer. And I had a really wonderful woman reach out to me a few days ago and offer to produce a YouTube show for me. So I may do that. I'm actually thinking about that. I resisted really doing much for the last few years. But so Andrew-Brewer is how to find me. I list my bio and all the things I've done historically. And Facebook is where I rant and roll and do all that for the most part. So that's me.
Cool.
And I have nothing going on in terms of events or anything else. I used to do a bunch, but don't do too many anymore. So.
And I will put all the links in the description, and so will Kathy on her professional aquarium channel. So we'll have all of those for you. Anyway, so let's dive in. So as I mentioned last week, Andy's rants got a bit of a lot of interest, shall we say? And so we're going to look at a couple of charts related to that kind of thing that we were talking about. But first, Kathy's going to talk a little bit about things that have happened, because we keep getting comments saying nothing's happened, but things are really happening. All right, so maybe they haven't challenged the election results, so maybe they haven't got the right evidence for that yet. We did say there'd be lots of twists and turns, but things are happening. And so we're going to run through some of that. I will mention Joe Biden's judicial appointments. He's record-breaking judicial appointments. So that's one thing he's done. Kathy, you mentioned a couple of other things.
Well, on December 24th, which was when Jupiter and Saturn squared exactly with Mercury distantly in the mix, Biden signed 50 bills into law, 50, and they were wide ranging. I think the eagle is now officially our national bird. It's anti-hazing, child abuse protections. Also, he issued an astonishing number of clemency. Uh, he just granted clemency to a terrific
Mm,
number of people who are on death row. So that's one big thing. We had said that these particular transits of the week that we're in right now did not bode good news for Donald Trump, and a publication called The Hill, which focuses only on things happening in DC. It's a political publication, and my experience is that it's pretty far right leaning, even though it claims to be bipartisan.
mhm,
The Hill has actually come out and it is advocating for using the 14th Amendment to keep Trump out of office. Now, I've mentioned this not because this means it's going to get anywhere, but this
yeah.
plays out bad news for Trump, people saying things to him. Also, we've
Mhm,
talked a lot about problems involving Russia, about the EU, I'm sorry, about NATO getting increasingly motivated to do something. And Russia bombed Ukraine on Christmas
oh,
Day. And there's been, I think
big
Finland
time.
seized a ship that was cutting telecommunication cables, which seems to be
Hmm.
a theme. And I suspect it's going to have something to do more when Mars, retrograde Mars, opposes Pluto in Aquarius on January 3rd. I bet there'll be more things having to
Mm.
do with communication cutting or grids going down. I'm sure that there are, oh, the final thing I'll mention for all of you who are sitting there sending me messages going, nothing happened. I will remind you that when Jupiter squared Saturn and pulled in Kamala's Venus on August 19th, when the DNC started, there wasn't actual formal action until several days later. So we don't
Hmm.
know what happened on the 24th in her life, except that she was not on vacation as previously planned, but still in.
Hmm.
So hold tight, everybody. There's still a lot more
Yeah,
to come from this.
yeah. And I just want to give a shout out for Jessica Denson's YouTube channel too. She left Midas Touch because they refused to question the election results at all. And she has been interviewing some constitutional attorneys about all of this as well. So, and a lot of them, are talking about the 14th Amendment. Again, who knows if that will happen, but things are stirring, shall we say. So,
Mhm.
anyway, so just to kind of change the tone for just for this one, and I'll be back home for our next recording. And the news will be started up again, of course, because we'll be heading into the new year. We thought we would have a look at two um, what shall we say, representations of white boy privilege, masculine toxicity in the news. We were looking at Matt Gaetz, and that report was released in. That was unprecedented that the report was released. Now, the committee did not all agree on releasing it, but not one of them disagreed with the findings in the report, I will say. And then there's the other one is Pete Hegseth, who we have a wonderful timed chart for, because they just seem to get away with it, right? Anything else you want to say before we look at the charts, guys?
In both instances, there's a, I'm reminded of the long-standing problems in the church and people
Hmm.
very high up turning a blind eye to or condoning behavior
Hmm.
that is actually criminal. And we know that that has happened with Matt
Hmm.
Gaetz because there's somebody doing time for
Yes.
schemes that he was part of. And
Yeah.
there was, I think, well, at any rate, he's got powerful family. He comes from a wealthy background,
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. His chart's actually quite different from the nominee for the Defense Department secretary, so it'll be interesting for all of us to take a look at this. So, ready to look at
Hmm.
Matt's chart?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to put them in. And before, if anybody comes on the comments again saying we need to both sides this and look at toxic femininity, I will mention the name of Giselle Pelicot, whose husband drugged her and raped her, did all kinds of awful things to her body, and invited men, so many men, to come and do the same and filmed it. And we women know that things like this have been going on forever. And so we may quickly look at that in the end. But, I'm wearing my feminist t-shirt today. Do not come on both sides it. Sure. Oh, okay. So Matt Gaetz first then.
Now he's got some
Well,
interesting things
Matt,
being activated, but let's look at him as a
as a
creature.
person, yeah. So he was born May 7th, 1982. We do not have a time. So we've put the sun on the ascendant. Um, I just immediately just saw his Venus-Mars opposition. Now, not everybody with a Venus-Mars opposition would be a Matt Gaetz, of course. But he has Mars in Libra. They're in mutual reception too. Venus is in Aries, which is Mars sign. Mars is in Libra, which is Venus sign. And the nodes are right there, right now, as the report's released. So, this kind of indicates to me, somebody who just thinks he has the right to disempower women, in my opinion.
Well, that Mars in Libra could make him quite the schmoozer. He could be someone who could talk anyone into anything, play the game,
Oh.
find how to get across to someone. And Venus in Aries is the hunter, the huntress. That's like wanting to go in for the
Hmm.
kill, not wanting to keep anything, but there's an
Hmm.
adrenaline thrill with that. And there's also pitting men against women, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That would be part of it. I was immediately drawn to uh, the fact that the moon is somewhere in Scorpio. We don't know the exact degree, but it is somewhere
Hmm.
near the middle of Scorpio, and it is roughly full. It's opposite that
Hmm.
Taurus sun, and this is very fixed. It's in signs that have to do with physicality, maybe power, definitely money. Um, and Moon and Scorpio could also, there could be, we have our own reactions to him, but uh, he could have a real charismatic, I know what to do to get you to agree to what I want streak in him with that.
Oh, I think he does totally. Sorry, Andy, I'll let you talk in a minute. I just wanted to
No,
mention
no.
that, because Mars is at 0 degrees. I always think of the 0 degree as a bit like the Fool's card in the tarot. But it's kind of very um it's new energy of that sign. So he's kind of like this kid kind of playing with toys really, and I think he can be very charming, like Kathy said. But also Jupiter and Uranus are both at 3 degrees. Jupiter at 3 Scorpio, I will point over here, and Uranus at 3 Sagittarius, and therefore they are all in aspect to this Mars and Venus as well. And, he kind of, I think Kathy's entirely right. But of course, how we live our chart is, if somebody had a similar chart to this, they wouldn't necessarily have to live it the way he has, I would say. That's all.
Andy,
Yeah. Uh,
what are your reactions just to the birth chart?
Well, there are a couple of things that jump out to me. The most obvious to me, of course, is the opposition of Venus and Mars. The next thing that jumps out is he's got 6 straight retrograde planets from Mars on out. And he's also got an exact quincunx of Venus and Jupiter. And we talked about this on Monday. You know, I said that when I see a quincunx that involves Aries and Scorpio, I'm already expecting a certain amount of power, whether that's for good or bad or outward or inward is still to be determined. So I would agree that this is, and the other thing for me, the disclaimer, this dude looks exactly like my father. So I have a very interesting reaction to him just from jump. There's multiple ways, and I tend to look at astrology, not so much from the aspects that are hitting, but more the progressions of how they evolve. And the other thing that jumps out to me when I look at his chart is by progression. If you do the, degree a year, his Venus is about to conjunct his sun. And that's going to be a 43-degree difference. So we would expect that at the age of 43, which would be next year, he's going to have some sort of external event to help clarify the relationship he has between Venus and the sun. I would think that that's a bad thing for him personally, because I think he has so many skeletons in the closet. Of course, this dude annoys me. The whole thing, and I'm going to again go on a quick little editorial. The idea that a man can rape underage women, and that's an ethical issue, what the hell? Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is the idea that these white men, if they're Republicans, if this guy was black or he was a Democrat or he was somebody that wasn't all about Jesus and the Republicans, he'd be in prison. But this is an ethical issue. So, I could go down a really dark path here in a hurry, but from going back to the astrology, and I'll talk a little bit later about the ethics of this, I think that he's about to have a big Calambo. I do, next year. When I looked at his chart, I didn't really know his background. When I did his chart last night, I assumed this is a rich kid. This is a rich kid who thinks like rich kids. And there's a certain sort of orientation that he has. Not to disparage people who have money, but there is a sort of a spoiled, bratty kind of vibe to his chart to me. So many of these things at 3 degrees. And again, I would think the age of 30 was a big deal for him. Again, looking at the progressions. But simplistically, he's not sure whether to be assertive or to be passive. He's got basically a male-female kind of duality to him, I think. Again, the mutual reception of Venus and Mars. And I just think he's ready for some problems. And I do think if I was trying to predict his future, that next year he has serious problems. And I would say he has serious financial problems at some point in the future, too. It would not surprise me that there are people that come back in civil suits against him as much as criminal suits.
Andy,
I don't like this.
Look at his Saturn. Look at his Saturn. I want to hear what you say about his Saturn. Look at his progressed Saturn.
So he's 42, so that would put him at 28 Scorpio.
So because it was retrograde, so it went direct at some point. So his progressed Saturn is at 15.
You would do it a different. Okay. Oh, so it's come back around. All right. So
it's within months of his progressed Saturn is within months of being on his natal Saturn.
Going back and then reversing and coming forward. Well, again, I think that's like a wake-up call. And I think the wake-up call for Matt Gaetz is not going to be the one that's like, people bringing him orange juice and, muffins. I think it's going to be complicated for him.
And his progressed Venus is almost exactly, it has just been exactly conjunct his natal Chiron. So
yeah, I mean, the way that I do the degree a year, I'm like old school. I'm like old school Dane Ruger kind of stuff the way I do it. I have my own kind of ways of looking at it. I'm not really an astrologer. I mean, I just kind of use it as an adjunct. But I think that Matt Gaetz. Okay, so I'm going to say this. Here we go. Here we go, Andy. All right. There are men coming up to women right now, the your body, my choice nonsense, who are aggressive, belligerent in women's face. This madness has to end. And Gaetz is, to me, the poster boy for what that looks like. A self-entitled, prissy little white boy that gets away with this because he has a rich father and he's in Congress. If he was a rap star, we'd never see him again, right? So it's not fair that we continue to push forward this narrative that, well, he's on the good side and he's pro-life because he's a Republican, whatever. This dude rapes teenagers. He went across state lines. He probably drugs these women. There's a lot of stuff we would say is not exactly ethical behavior. And even though that most people in Congress set on this report because whether we should release it would it damage his career. And this guy was going to be attorney general. What does that really say about the orientation of the entire Trump administration, the entire whatever there are now? So yeah, I expect next year to be a problem for Matt Gaetz, and I'm hopeful that that's true. And I try not to let my emotions impact what I see moving forward in the future, because that's bad clairvoyance, right? But I think that there are definite complications coming Matt Gaetz's way. So that's my first take on his astrology.
Well, as well as the transiting nodes on that Mars-Venus opposition, I'd love to quickly just mention that progressed Saturn again, coming back to his natal Saturn, because the way I do it is if it was retrograde at some point, it's stationed direct by progression and is coming back to it. So he's having a progressed Saturn return, but his Saturn is 16 Libra in a quincunx again to his 16-degree Sun. And so Saturn returns, most people know of like a usual Saturn return at about 29 and about age 58. They're a time of maturity. They're often kind of a hard lesson out where you've been, acting it with maturity, or so he's having that in spades, but it's also square to his lunar nodes, and his south node is at 16 Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. So he's having some really hard lessons, I think, as you mentioned, Andy.
Yeah.
It's quite, yeah.
I think this is really, I expect, Aunt Clara and we expect some pushback against this. I expect pushback against this nonsense. I expect pushback against this steamroller of white privilege, of male privilege, of your body, my choice. No, we're throwing that crap off. That's going to end. That's going to end. And again, it's probably no secret that I really do not like any of these men and the way that they operate. I don't like the way in which they present themselves. I don't like the way in which their male superiority complex is pushed down and it disseminated to the masses, and you have men being so aggressive. Somebody needs to like slap these boys. And I personally get really tired of seeing this happen over and over and over, and this be presented as a viable means in which to operate. Trump, I know stories about Trump from being in a modeling industry, and stuff with Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth and all the rest of them. It's not fair to women. It's not fair. It's just not fair, and it needs to end. So, I mean, that's how I feel about him.
And Kathy and I are going, yeah, it's always been happening.
Yeah, but it's different now.
We've
It's
lived it.
different now.
But
I understand. I
well,
understand that men have always been obnoxious and they have
mm,
always been rude and date rape. I get it. I'm well aware of that. But what's happening now is rhetorically, men feel like
mm,
it's okay. There was a time when they would have at least considered maybe this is not the appropriate thing to say, or maybe I just can't go up and
mm,
be all rape
mhm.
boy right from jump, right in the middle of, Kroger's, right? So what Trump is doing and what all these men are doing
Yep.
is allowing this way of interacting to take place. And it needs somebody. I've tried, but I'm just one old man. I can only say so much. Um, it's just disgusting to me. And I do think it's worse now because of when you start having t-shirts, your body, my choice, and some dude thinks that that's cool to wear in public, what the hell? This
Mhm,
needs
mm,
to go back under the rocks from which it has sprung. And Matt Gaetz, I
mhm,
believe, is kind of a poster boy for that. And I think that his time is coming. And I don't think it's supportive of, I expect Trump to have bad issues happening in the future. And I expect Matt Gaetz as well. And I expect Matt Gaetz's issues will probably happen next summer. So, so that's that. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. So yeah.
Can I talk about some of the current transits to Matt's chart?
yeah.
I can that so there's some things going on now that support why it took this long, or like why now is this information coming out that has been mumbled about, hinted about, said openly by his colleague in Florida, who again is doing time for a scheme
Yeah.
that he was part of. And there are a couple of big things I want to mention. Neptune, which has recently stationed direct, is in his solar 11th house, which is Congress, groups of people, and it is squaring his natal Neptune in the solar eighth house of other people's money, secrets, criminality, things that are invested in. So there, that square is just pumping into being. So I would expect more to come. So that's one big piece. The second big piece is the Jupiter Saturn square occurred with transiting Saturn in his solar 10th house of career and public reputation, squaring Jupiter in his solar first house of identity, so information coming out about him. And that Saturn is trining his moon. No matter where his moon is, it's in a trine, and Jupiter is in an
Mm,
inconjunct or a quincunx or an adjustment to that moon. So that explains to me why something was forced out now and it has a deleterious, yay, please, impact on his
mhm,
professional standing. I mean, it did result in his leaving Congress. I believe his current position is he's on the staff of OAN. Oh boy, One American Network, um,
mhm,
which seems to fit.
mm,
But the third big thing going on with all of this that I want to mention is that Mars retrograde in his solar house of communication and like getting around, like crossing state lines, whatever, that Mars retrograde is going to go back to 17 degrees Cancer at the beginning of March and sit there until the middle of at the beginning of, it's going to get there at the beginning of February and sit there till the middle of March. It stations direct at 17 Cancer on February 23rd. And it's going to be this butt up against his North Node, butt up
And
mhm.
against his North Node,
squaring his Saturn.
squaring his Saturn,
Yep.
just sitting there and in a sextile to
To
his
his
sun.
son.
Yep.
So that's a
Oh,
very
and
comfortable period for him.
and the recent Mercury retrograde that we just had, Mercury station direct opposing his Mercury in Gemini. So news coming out or the report being released about him, so he's been hit by a lot of transits and some of these bigger ones too. So
And Pluto at the very beginning of Aquarius is in his solar ninth house of politics, but also legalities, the courts. And it's moving into a sextile or an opportunity aspect with his well, it's in an open trine with his Mars, and so Mars in the house of romance and risk taking. So stuff coming out, secrets, revelations, big important things. But that Pluto was moving into a sextile with his Uranus and Sagittarius, and that's going to go on. And when is that exact? This summer, I think. Andy, there you
Mm.
go. That does not
Mm.
look good. There may be others
Yeah.
coming forward. There may be people coming out of the woodwork, some of whom would surprise him. There may be somebody not from this nationality, not from this, oh, I don't know, country, who plays a role.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
still maintain that there is a pushback against this. And just real quickly, because my mind tends to go the way it goes, I want to talk about the idea of toxic femininity, which is to me a ridiculous notion. And for the people that bring this up, um, I'm a 69-year-old white male with all the privileges that came with being a good-looking white boy all these years. I get it, and I recognize that I had a privilege, and I recognize that it is being used as a club against other people, women and minorities. And so I think it's like all lives matter, that nonsense, right? Oh, all lives matter. We have to have white privilege day or whatever. We don't. We really don't. And it is unfathomable to me that there is still this pushback. I'm saying this as a 69-year-old white man, that there is still this pushback that we have to blame women. Like we blame women for what they wear when they get raped. We blame women for what they did last Saturday for when they get raped. It has nothing to do with anything, but it's a way of manipulating the narrative. And the way that the narratives have been restructured, and I want to thank all the lovely people that sent me death threats all those years. Thank you for thinking of me when I stood up against QAnon, because it was trying to distort the way we looked at reality to try to do this bait and switch. Y'all want to save the children until some Republican rapes a 13-year-old, and then he found Jesus. This nonsense has to end. And we need to be able to stand up and say that the reframing, the cognitive anchors that come from language and the way in which men manipulate that for their own purpose, we need to really look at that. We need to call that out. Why does Trump get away with things?
Well,
Because
let's face it, Andy, it's been done for centuries.
yeah, I mean, why does Trump
Or the
get,
women in myths are the
yeah,
bad guys. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, why does Trump get away with it? Because we try to structure the narrative in such a way, we try to distort the way we try to distort the meanings of words, the connotative values of words. And what I've tried to push back all these years in the books and all the things that I've done is to try to say that it's important not to let words and their associative qualities influence the way we see ourselves and the way that we sort of bow to power. And I'm hopeful, and I'll shut up about this because I know I can go ringer. Matt Gaetz, I believe he's in for some issues. That would be my prediction, that he's in for some issues next year. And I'm hopeful that it's indicative of people collectively saying, we're not playing this game. It's time. And it's for people that think, oh, we should give equal time. Well, it's not equal now. It's not equal now. I'm very much in opposition to the idea that people can just railroad Latinos and Latino men and African American men and women of every color. It's just absurd. And women in general. I have a daughter. Angela has daughters. They have to deal with this. They're young women, beautiful young women in their 20s and 30s. They have to deal with this madness every damn day of their lives. It needs to end. It just needs to end. And I'm so over it. And again, I'm a 69-year-old white man. What is it like for a 22-year-old woman, a Latina woman in Texas or someplace? This madness has to end. So Happy New Year again. Sorry. And if you want to blame somebody, blame me. I'm used to it. I've had death threats for the last 8 years. I'm used to it. So bring it.
You can blame me too. I have two daughters. I'm with you, and I've been speaking out about this for a long time too, Andy. So anyway, Pete Hegseth, yeah? You want to have
Yeah,
a quick look at him?
right.
He's another peach. We have a timed chart for him with a double A rated time. So his ascendant is right on the ascendant of the USA chart, interestingly. But anyway, go on. He is the nominee for Secretary of Defense, right? Has no experience for that role, but anyway.
And yet another Gemini. Yet another Gemini. The
Yes,
Trump cadre has been
yes.
filled with Geminis.
Not that all Geminis are, you know.
So he has
Go on.
moon,
Yeah,
moon
Kathy,
in
your turn.
moon in Pisces, which can be a very empathetic, supportive, lovely placement. It can also indicate a complete lack of awareness of boundaries between you and something else, or a lack of regard for boundaries. It can be an everything is mine kind of moon. It also can have massive problems staying in what passes for physical reality. It can be someone who's
Mhm.
highly a dreamer, or maybe has big substance problems. And there are many stories of drinking involving him. Oddly, his moon
Mhm.
is he shares this with Fred Rogers, and you're going to go, and I will point out that the saint of our the boomer childhood, Gen X childhood, whatever, our sainted Mr. Rogers was a lifelong Republican for whatever that is worth. Um, Gave presents to his crew consisting of donations in their name rather than presents to them. That would be Moon in Pisces. And also, he appropriated people's names and stories for all his characters. And that would be a playing out of Moon in Pisces. And so the moon and the sun are by sign. They're squared, so there's like not an internal cohesion in him. And he has a lot of
Oh,
placements mutable, tons of things in
yep.
mutable signs. So this is this way and that. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll go this way. Very distractible. Is this think back to what we when we talked about Mark Milley, you might want to go back and look at that. The difference between this chart and that general's chart. Is this someone who has the staying power, the focus to actually lead a lead the military?
And his moon is a almost exactly square as Gemini. Venus that's in his seventh as well. You know, he's
Yeah, and I was just going to
had
bring
this.
that up too. To me, that's
Yeah,
like a
this.
big deal. Retrograde Venus square his moon. I mean, that's just like
Mhm.
jumping out to me as neon. This is a thing.
Yeah, you know, and but that can also make him quite charming too. You know, we talked about the charm side of Gaetz, and you know, there's stories about him with women as well. So you know,
But there's a duality to both of them, though.
Yep.
There's
yeah.
like the good Pete and the bad Pete, the nice Matt and the bad Matt. There's a duality to these dudes, and I think that's the thing.
Hmm.
Like Trump can be, all charisma, at times,
Hmm.
but there's this sort of light and dark. You know, I mean, this is a Plutonian kind of theme to this entire group, right? But when I looked at it, the thing that jumped out to me was retrograde Venus squaring the moon. You know,
Mm.
to me, that's like a theme. I think that's going to play out in other ways. Um, but
Well, especially because transiting Neptune right now is
is
sitting on
parked
his
right on top of it.
moon.
And
And
squaring his
squaring that
Venus.
Venus. Yeah. So
And that
I
square will be
would be,
exact in March.
yeah, I'd be surprised, if this administration does come into power, if he is confirmed. I, I would be very surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, me too, Louise. I feel the same.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, the current Jupiter Saturn square at 13, um, come on, words, 13 Gemini Pisces, is creating a T-square in his chart with Jupiter on his descendant, on the cusp to his house of
Hmm.
uh, partners and open enemies. And Saturn is in the third house of communication, opposing his Mars in the ninth house, which is legal matters, the government, um, uh, and well, actually, it's a grand cross because transiting
Hmm.
Mercury is also a part of
Right.
it in the first house. So he's he's going to get a level of scrutiny that is beyond what he has had before, and some of it could be extremely unwelcome because Mercury is
Hmm.
is coming out of its retrograde travels, and it's like carrying the information do that it had, and I don't know, he could
Mm.
ultimately regret being in the spotlight here.
I would agree
And
with that.
Jupiter will station direct on February the 4th at 11 degrees Gemini, right on his descendant. So, all these transits will kind of start coming to roost then, about what people have found out about him and so on and so forth. Mm, interesting.
So Mars retrograde um, is going to be as it moves back through Cancer, it's going to be in a sextile to his Saturn, so that could revisit some things that bring more governmental scrutiny into it, but it's in a really uncomfortable relationship with his son. And when it sits at
Mm.
17 Cancer, it's going to be in this uncomfortable, nagging relationship with his son. That's a semi-sextile, and it's going to be in an inconjunct to his Pluto in the 10th, some kind of adjustment in the level of power that
Oh
he
no,
experiences.
Mars is square. Square is Pluto.
It's
Hmm.
square. Oh, it's square. Right. Yeah, it's square it now, and it's
Yeah.
just going to square on it. So sorry, I said that wrong.
Hmm.
And it's going
Yeah.
to also be opening up his wound of Chiron at 15 Taurus in the fifth house
Yeah.
of risk taking and romance and all kinds of things.
It's also,
Not
when it's
Yeah.
going retrograde, going to have a period where it's trining his moon too.
And that would be in
Hmm.
January.
I mean,
And of course,
late Cancer, it's going to be trining his moon.
Yep, in
and
January.
of course, as we speak, Chiron is just about station direct at exactly 19 Aries, opposing his Pluto. So
Yeah, wow.
so yeah, all his kind of woundedness is really being revealed to us.
And
Yeah.
quincunxing his Saturn.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but he's different, a different kind of toxic masculinity, I think, to Matt Gaetz, but he's also got that kind
He's
of
more
delusional,
subdued, kind of.
yeah, yeah, um,
I think
but he is,
his chart speaks much more to the stories of drinking that have been
yes,
coming out and out and out and out and out. Gaetz's chart is more seduction and power and money and
I
power games, and this is more, it feels good, I'm going this way. Okay, now, oh, I'm going to do this, or not quite always being at the helm.
Yeah. And of course, you know, when somebody does that kind of drinking that he's alleged to have done, where he's being carried home from places, they often do other kind of risky behavior things with that as well. And, you know, that probably involved stories with the women too, so.
He's also got Saturn square Neptune, doesn't he? Natally.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Yep. He does. And the Mercury retrograde hit that as well. So, you know, the last Mercury retrograde stationed retrograde on his Neptune and square his Saturn, and then went back to just to his 12th house, which is often a place of addiction or escapism as well, and such things.
So all these things are now coming out about him from that time, that because after that retrograde, information coming out, he's now in the public eye in a way that he wasn't before, even though he was on camera.
Yeah.
These kinds of stories weren't what were dogging him. So are we complete with this?
You know, the whole thing of, and yeah, I just wanted to say the whole thing of Andy rant, you know, about these good boys getting away with it. You know, nobody's asked him to withdraw yet because of all this.
Can you imagine if he was a Democrat?
Anyway.
Can you imagine if this was a Democratic congressman? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Compare and contrast. Al Franken.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, that's it, I think, today. I don't know if we need to look at Giselle's chart. Maybe we can, if we get any more comments siding it about toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. And that's not to say women cannot do toxic things, but it's a whole different kettle of fish. So, you know.
It's not a cultural, it is not a cultural issue. It's an individual issue. Are there women that are not so great? Well, sure. But there's not an entire cultural narrative designed to suppress white men. There is an entire cultural narrative designed to suppress women. And the reason for that, Andy's going to give you his opinion. The reason for that is these men fear women. They do not want women to have an equal chance. They do not want them to have an equal playing field. This is why they tilt it. It's the game is rigged. It's like going to Vegas. The blackjack table is rigged in their favor. All right. So are there women who are not so great? Well, sure. But there's not an entire culture designed to put them down. And what happens to women is just unfathomable. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. And there's gaslighting and all this stuff that happens. It just it annoys me. I can only imagine what it's like to live it as a young woman in this culture. And we haven't even talked about what Trump's presidency, if he gets there, would do to women who happen to get pregnant and don't want the child, don't want to carry the child full term, or something happens to them accidentally. I mean, what can I say?
I'll tell you one big difference, Andy, you know, as a lifelong feminist. You know, I love that Andy speaks up for us and is saying all that he's doing, but I just see all this praise and like, thank you, Andy. But yet when we speak up like that, we're accused of being like raging harpies. So there you go.
Hey,
That's another aspect of it.
Status.
I'm a raging harpy. I'll show everybody my t-shirt for today.
Beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful, Mary Shelley.
There you go.
Yeah, well, my death threats were against QAnon and against standing up to white
Mm,
power. It had nothing to do with men and women. It was the idea that
mm,
this whole QAnon, the QAcon, as I called it, uh, game was real. And because I was a famous
yeah.
psychic at the time, the fact that I didn't go along with them, once called the most controversial psychic in the world, because I didn't jump on their bandwagon, they decided that I was a problem to them. We need to stand up. And I was willing to risk my career in 2017. It kind of took a little bit of a hit for a few years because somebody needs to be willing to say that this is a problem
Hmm.
and stand up for it. And without that, it's just they're just going to roll over us. We need to understand what's being done and why this narrative is being shifted to support these white men, this power grab, the privatization of Earth here. And I'm thankful for whatever positive things are being said about me. I've been lucky to have positive things said about me for a long time, but I've also been unfortunate to have negative things said about me for a long time. I guess that's what comes with taking a position
Me
and
too.
speaking your mind, for sure. So
Oh,
Happy New Year, everybody. 2025 is going to be a good year in spite of what it may appear right this second. That's my
well,
that's my
but
theory.
but but part of it is, as I write about all the time in my Substack as well, and talk about in my solo videos, is we all have to kind of stand up against this and take a stand
Absolutely.
for things. And so this is part of why I do what I do, to encourage others to stand up as well, you know.
And thank God for
So
you for doing that. For sure. And Kathy too, because I've known Kathy for a long time. We've talked about this
yeah,
and for years and years and years. So
well, it's why we
That's why
do
we're
why
compelled to
we're all
do
here
this.
together.
We
I don't care.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
I don't care about making predictions anymore. I've sort of outgrown that in some sense. And
Hmm.
I guess I was pretty famous at some point for making predictions. But what I think is more important is to look at how we empower people and how we support people, because this is,
Mm-hmm.
I predicted in 1987, when I was a young, just psychic on the scene at the time, that there would be a replay of the 1930s in the United States, which people thought was crazy. I kept repeating that for years and years and years. I said this Nazi thing will happen in the United States, and it has, and it's got to
Yep.
end. And I don't think it will
Yep.
take hold the way it did before, because I think there are more decent, rational, polite, sane people in this country than there are crazy white boys. And just because they have a power and they have access to media and they have access to the things they have access and money, there's still more people that are nice and friendly and in a happy space and want to
Hmm.
do happy things. That's why I'm still optimistic about the United States in spite of what's happening right now. And for women, uh, my heart is with you. That's all I can say. That's
Any
all I can
last
say.
words from you, Kathy?
Next year is going to turn everybody's fire on in ways you
Ooh.
cannot possibly imagine. So use this time, use this quiet time between the holidays and the new year. Figure out, just spend some time in quiet contemplation about what's most important to you and
Mm,
reprioritize and start making those priorities the framework of how you approach everything. You don't have to say yes to everything. If something fits your priorities or furthers something you believe in, maybe yes. If it doesn't, this is the time to say, I don't have the bandwidth, goodbye. And take it easy because the beginning of January, all hell could break loose, to be quite
hmm.
honest. So get your own life sane and stable
Hmm.
and in order, and just remind yourself of what's important to you, and spend some time actually saying things to people who are important to you. This
Mm.
you're laying your groundwork. We're all making our own little runways for what is going to be an extraordinarily exciting year. And I will end without revealing any client confidences in this, every client consultation I have had projecting into next year is one of possibility and empowerment, not living under a boot. That says
Same here.
everything to me.
Same for me. So, absolutely. And I'd like to apologize if my internet went a bit wobbly here and there. I don't have as much control over it here, of course, but we'll be back to our normal places next week. And we'll see you all then. Peace out.
Happy New Year.